Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
All right, good evening. Welcome to our Tuesday, September 10 Sioux Falls City Council meeting. Thanks for joining us, and to those of you joining us online, thank you as well. Clerk, we'll go ahead and get started by reading our roll, please.
Councilmember Staley. Here. Brecky. Here. Erickson. Here. Kiley.
Here.
Neitzert.
Here.
Selberg.
Happily here.
Sale.
Here.
Starr.
Present.
Wow. All right. With us this evening, to give our invocation, we're honored to have Pastor Kirk Thorson. Pastor Kirk is with Living Word Free Lutheran Church. People are asking where that is. That's under the big, huge Lewis and Clark water tank on 85th Street. If you know where that is, that's where his church is. So Pastor Kirk's going to give our invocation, so please rise for that, and then stay standing for our Pledge of Allegiance.
I'd like to thank each of you on council and Mr. Mayor for your service to our city and community. And I recognize you probably all hear far more complaints and criticisms than you do people saying thank you and words of affirmation and thanks. And so I just want to let you know that we as a church seek to pray for each of you. We ask that God would give you wisdom. We know that you have a difficult job. I know that because I'm a father of 4 kids, and it's hard to keep everyone happy. That's 4 people, and it only gets harder on city councils when you're looking at 180,000 people. And so we know you have a big job, and so we ask that God would give you wisdom for each of that. I think of 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 1 through 4. First of all, then I urge that prayers and supplications, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. This is good, and it is pleasing in the sight of God our Savior, who desires all people to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth. Heavenly Father, we thank you for tonight. We thank you for these leaders and government officials. We ask that you'd give them wisdom and discernment in the choices and decisions they make for our city. Help them in times of disagreement to maintain unity and civility. We ask that you would grant them health and safety as they work long hours and have many items on their plate in their jobs and families and public service. Protect them and grant them good health. We pray that you would help them to bring forth justice, help each of them to discern and see the motives of individuals. We would pray, too, for your blessing and safety and protection upon our city workers. We think of those who serve in a variety of ways, for our police and firemen and women, for those who serve as city workers. God, we're thankful that you are good and gracious. You are the one from whom hope and trust and confidence comes. And we ask that you would use these public officials for your good plans and purpose tonight, for the month to come, and for these days and years to come too now. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, we'll move on to item 4, which is our consent agenda, and look for any changes or motions on that item.
Move approval. Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Councilor Selberg, seconded by Kiley. Any discussion on that, Council? All right, we'll vote, please.
Councilmember Staley.
Yes.
Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We're on to item 10, which will be the approval of our regular agenda.
Move to approve.
Second, Erickson.
All right, motion to approve by Kiley, seconded by Erickson. Any discussion, Council?
Motion to amend the regular agenda by moving item 21 to immediately following item 15.
Second.
All right, motion by Erickson, seconded by Kiley on that. We'll take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley. Yes. Brecky.
Yes.
Erickson.
Yes.
Kiley.
Yes.
Neitzert.
Yes.
Selberg.
Yes.
Sale.
Yes.
Starr.
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We're back to the amended main
Make a
motion.
motion to amend the regular agenda by moving item 22 immediately following item 12.
Second.
All right, motion by Erickson on that and seconded by Counselor Kylie. We'll take a vote on that too.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, that also passes 8-0, so we're back to the amended motion. Any other changes or amendments? All right, we'll take a vote on this, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We're at the general public input portion of tonight's agenda. As a reminder, input during this portion will last no more than 3 minutes per person, and in total last no more than 30 minutes. During general public input, the public is welcome to speak on any topic that does not appear later on in the agenda. For regular agenda items following general public input, comments are limited to 3 minutes unless the item is being presented for final adoption, in which case public input is limited to 5 minutes. For all regular agenda items, comments are limited to the agenda item that is under consideration at the time only. So at this time, I'd like to invite any members of the public forward for general public input. And clerk, please note our time is 7:06. Good evening.
Scott Harrisman, Sioux Falls. I was telling Councilor Seeley about this last week, and she said, well, you should come to public input and tell us about this. So this is just an observation, not really a complaint. But I heard you guys talking earlier about Project Trim, and we've always heard the excuses that if the city had to do that, it would cost a lot of money, it would take a lot of time. So we know we have the emerald elm thing going on, and so I had to have a tree cut down by the city. And we used private contractors to do that, and I had another tree in my front yard. So I asked the contractor, I said, can I pay you to cut down my tree while you're there? He said, yeah, that'd be great. And he ground the stump the next day. Well, the stump for my one out in the boulevard wasn't ground for months and months and months. And I was like, why is it taking so long to grind these stumps? I had to go out there and trim all the trees growing out of it and stuff. Because when the private contractors came around to cut the trees, there's two guys. One guy in the ground, one guy up in the tree. They had a mulcher, goes right in the back of the truck. They were fast. They were cutting trees down left and right. So the city used their own people to grind the stumps. And I observed them one day when I was home for lunch, and I said, well, this is why it's taking so long. There was 5 gentlemen. They had 2 trucks. They had a tractor, and they would put the grindings into the bucket of the tractor, and they'd drive the tractor over to the truck, and the other guys would stand there while they're driving the tractor, and then they'd go back. I was like, they need 5 guys to grind a stump? Couldn't they just put the thing in the back of the truck and just shoot the chips up in there? Well, after they were done, I had to scoop out 3 garbage pails full of chips. 3 garbage pails. I thought the chips were supposed to be removed because you can't plant grass over the top of that because it sucks all the nitrogen out. You got to put dirt in there. So I can tell you why Project Trim probably would be expensive if you use city employees. If you use private contractors, it'd probably be pretty inexpensive. And since I still have some time, we noticed today that there was charges brought against the 4 people who are actually not going to be charged criminally, and they're getting a $500,000 fine if they're found guilty for a company that doesn't exist, so I'm not quite sure how they're going to pay that fine. But as we knew all along, these guys were tied to the collapse. The federal government is charging them, yet we voted for the bunker ramp, knowing these guys were attached to it. Unbelievable.
Thank you. Anyone else this evening for general public input? Come forward, please, sir. Good evening.
Emmett Rice-Stroffer. I grew up in Sioux Falls, graduate of Lincoln High School. I now reside in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I'm back here today. I'm working on a business plan in Sioux Falls, so I'd like to work with police, the road service department, and this council to get approval for a pedicab business. I've lived in Denver, Washington, D.C., now Vegas. I see this everywhere I go across America, and coming back to Sioux Falls, I love the activity that I see downtown. I'm thrilled because I grew up just 4 blocks south of downtown. When I was a kid, it was a ghost town. You couldn't get an ice cream cone. Everything was closed at night, and I love coming home and getting to see all my friends hang out downtown. I was wondering if I could show you a picture of what a pedicab looks like.
You sure
Is that
can.
possible on
Yeah,
here?
you bet.
Okay.
Go ahead and just stick your phone under there. It's on right now, so.
All right, so sorry the pictures aren't that big. So like this one, you can see there's advertising on it. That's how we're going to monetize the business. I don't want alcohol ads. I want local Sioux Falls businesses in Denver. You see Bud Light, the Rockies, things like that. If this can be done safely, they've regulated them in Denver. They have over 150 in Denver. They operate almost 365 days a year, even in the snow. I don't think we'd be that ambitious here. Honestly, when I do the cost analysis, we're not even going to make a lot of money. This is about loving Sioux Falls and the progress we've made. We want to partner with the local businesses. My grandmother told me she'd be my biggest customer because when she leaves MB Haskett, she wants to go down 3 blocks for a drink somewhere else, and it's too close to call a taxi or a Lyft. But too far for her to walk. So the pedicab fills that little gap for different modes of transportation. So mayor, council, I think this is a safe addition to the city. I want to work with you. My family loves this when they visit other cities. I love it. I've had friends who are drivers. I have friends here who are active in the bicycling community. They said that they will, pretty much run this business, but I want to invest in it and bring it to Sioux Falls. So today, just introducing the concept to you. If I have a little time, I'll just show you a couple more pictures. Sorry they're so small, but outside the Rockies game in Denver is where you'll see these a lot. They're usually 3 wheels. Sometimes they can be, up to 5 or 6. They come in different sizes. Some are covered. Some look very elegant, like a carriage for a princess type of thing. Some are decked out with sport logos. So just to reiterate my main point, I think it can be done safely. I want to work with the city. We have all the way through this winter to prepare for next season, which is my goal. I think we would need some legislative change to permit these, make sure it's done safely, do a pilot program or anything like that, and I'll send everyone a follow-up email.
Thanks, Emmett.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Anyone else this evening for general public input? All right, clerk, we'll move on to our next item, please.
Item 12, deferred from meeting of Tuesday, September 3rd, 2019, a resolution vacating the East 63rd Street North right-of-way from the east right-of-way line of Northcliffe Avenue to approximately 466 feet east as shown on Exhibit A.
Good evening, Kurt.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Kurt Peppel, Public Works Engineering. This is nothing new to the group. I don't really have a lot of new information on this. I know there's Craig Smith from the DOT is here and some others to answer any questions that that you guys might have, but I don't really have anything new to present at this time.
Sounds good, Kurt. We'll move right into questioning then. So, councilors, do you have questions for Kurt on this item?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilor Starr.
Kurt, is the applicant here tonight?
I don't believe, the DOT is here, sorry.
The applicant, but I mean the landowner, I guess, who's been the most vocal about this.
Len is unable to make it, but I believe he is represented. He does have a representative here.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions for Kurt on this item? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak on this item tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. Caleb Schiffroll, resident along 63rd Street, just to the east of there. I was unable to make the last meeting. Work got in the way. However, I just wanted to say, so I'm a volunteer firefighter for the Renner Fire Department. Heading west outside of my house. If you take the way Google says, which is going east and back and around, you add about 90 seconds onto your time, which generally is not a big deal if you're going to pick up groceries. But if you've got a medical emergency or a structure fire or anything like that, every second is a pretty big deal. Another thing when it comes to snow removal, I'm Len's neighbor. So along 63rd there, to the east along that gravel road, or west along that gravel road, it's either going to be Len or one of his employees or myself who actually removes the snow to the west. There's plows that generally drive by about 6 or 8 hours afterwards. And then I actually talked to the manager of XBO Logistics, which is right in between Gobi and International. He told me that it is fairly common for him to actually remove the snow along Gobi to their driveway because the plows don't make it in time. The big worry is reacting or making calls if I'm called up on the fire department. That's all I can really think of right now.
Got it. Thanks, Caleb.
All right,
Appreciate it. Anyone else to speak on this item tonight? Good evening.
Evening. Craig Smith with the South Dakota Department of Transportation. Not going to go over a lot of things we've talked about the previous two meetings. One additional thing, and I don't know if it was the fact we've been talking about this in front of council, but we have gotten complaints now about that lot, the maintenance of it. After inspecting that, we're having vandalism to the buildings. Apparently there's people living in their vehicles in the lot, people using motorcycles in the lot, things like that, in our review, we've decided with or without the vacation, we will likely be, or we will be closing access off to that just from a liability standpoint from the state until we can get that disposed of. So something we weren't aware of prior to the previous meetings, but it's something that came to light in the last week or so.
Got it. Thank you, Craig. Anyone else to speak on this item tonight?
Hi,
Good evening.
I'm Alexis Schifferl. I work for Lynn and I live on 63rd. He asked me to be his proxy, whatever that means. He asked me to ask it to be, this thing be deferred until next week so he can be here. So he has more time to get things arranged and all that kind of stuff with like signage and stuff. A lot of stuff, sorry.
Yeah.
And then, I think that's it. But thank you for your time. Thanks for listening to all of us. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you for being here. Anyone else to speak on this topic tonight? All right, councilors, I kind of went out of turn a little bit there, but I will ask if there were any questions for Kurt. You had one for him. Is there any more questions for Kurt on this? Councilor Brecky.
Oh, not for Kurt, for Craig.
I'm going
to. Craig, I'm Janet Brecky. I spoke on the phone with you earlier this week. Can you lay out the, I guess, the agreement that's been reached, between Len and the city and the state, and what we're going to try to work with him on these issues?
Yeah, through discussions, since we decided to move to close that, there's been discussions to allow Len to provide some signing which would be the access to the old Perkins site at Cliff Avenue, where it would be blocked off by the South Dakota DOT. He would be responsible to have the sign made and installed and maintain that, but we would allow that to remain in place until, at which point we sell off the property. And I think the discussion was, if it does take time, we're not going to go out tomorrow and close this. We would work with him as far as timing and wait till that sign was made before we did that closure. It's been roughly a year since we've owned the property, and we could certainly wait 2 more weeks or so to allow that sign to be made.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Craig while we have him up here from the council? Councilor Staley?
No, not for Craig, but I have.
Okay,
I
thanks,
think
Craig.
Erica Beck was going to do something.
Good evening, Erica Beck with the Mayor's Office. Councilor Staley asked me to bring a copy of the email that I had sent to the council this afternoon up to the front so that it's made public with respect to the conversation that I had had both with Craig Smith from DOT along with Len from Len's Awning and Canvas. So as you'll note from the email on the screen, there are 4 bullet points there with respect to the compromise that I feel we reached with Len today, along with DOT. And I'm grateful that DOT and Craig have been patient through this process and have been able to listen to Len's concerns and reach a compromise that, based on the conversation I had with Len earlier today, he agreed to. So I'll just point out these bullet points quickly if I could. Essentially, DOT has agreed to allow for temporary directional signage to be placed at the Perkins Cliff Avenue access point, as Craig had indicated. That signage will assist Len in redirecting his customers from that access point to 60th Street North and National Avenue. The DOT has also agreed to allow for this temporary directional signage to be in place at the Perkins Cliff Avenue access point until the land is sold. And at this time, I believe, and Craig, please correct me if I'm wrong, that is to take place most likely after the 1st of January 2020. In addition, the DOT has agreed to not close off the Perkins Cliff Avenue access site until such time that temporary directional signage is in place, which, we're anticipating will be well within a 3-week time frame. And then lastly, the city's Planning and Development Services Department will also work with Len on placement of temporary directional signage to be placed at the corner of 60th Street North and National Avenue. And that's based upon the conversation I had with Len this morning. That was the suggested location from Len at which that temporary signage could be placed that would be of most benefit to him and his customers. I feel really good about this compromise, and I think we've found solutions that work for both Len as well as the DOT. So I'd be happy to entertain any questions that you might have for me and based on those discussions.
Thanks,
Thank
Erica.
You.
Councilor Staley?
So Erica, if you'd leave that up, please. So when it says temporary signage at 60th Street, does that mean that Len will not be allowed to put permanent signage on there?
This is off-site premise signage that will help him redirect his customers, understanding that they no longer can utilize the 60th or the Cliff Avenue access point on Perkins Avenue, or at Perkins, sorry. So this would be temporary signage.
But, so what are the venues for him to have permanent signage?
Permanent signage would be allowed on his site based upon Planning and Development Services signage guidelines.
So he can't have any signage on that 60th Street area?
Correct.
Directing people?
Correct. Not permanently. So the discussion that I had with him was that next week when he is back in town, we will have a conversation with him with our Planning and Development Services team as to the location of the temporary signage and the time frame in which it will be up, which we're assuming will be well into that time frame in which the state has identified for the signage at the Cliff Avenue access as well, which should give him time, based upon the conversation I had with him, to understand how to reach his customers and ensure that he gets communications out to them, whether that's by postcard or by Facebook or by other social media avenues or his internet site, to understand that the most appropriate way for them to reach him is off of 60th Street and National.
Councilor Neitzer.
And I haven't discussed this with you, but obviously I would assume that the reason it can't be put permanently is that it would be an off-premise sign.
Correct.
And you'd have to permit it, and it's not in one of our billboard. It would be essentially we make no distinction. If it advertises something not on the premise, it's an off-premise sign, otherwise known as a billboard, and there's no mechanism to permit it on that street. It's not an opportunity district.
Right.
Yeah. Councilor Brecky.
Just a statement. I want to thank Erica and her team for working on this and putting this together. I was the one who made a motion for the first deferral, because as the dialogue was taking place, it just felt like there was room for something like this to happen. So I had actually intended to follow up with the telephone call to you, to explain to you why I deferred it and ask if you might try to work with him on this in some fashion like this, and then was unable to do that and then was out of town for 2 weeks. So thank you for your leadership in this. I really appreciate your efforts, what you did to work with this gentleman, and I feel really good about the solution, and I I'm really happy that it turned out this way, and I couldn't be more pleased. And I will tell you, I did have conversations with Len, and I did actually have them right around the 6 o'clock hour. He got back to me from some texts I received earlier, and he said he will use his best efforts, to get that temporary sign together in 2 to 3 weeks, and so he seems to me to be satisfied. He's very happy with the result, and so I'm happy about it too. So thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Look for a motion on this item.
Move to approve.
Okay. Have a second on that?
Second, Erickson.
Motion approved by Kylie and seconded by Erickson. Counselor Neitzer, did you have another?
Yeah, I don't know if it matters procedurally, but I think there was a pending motion from last week that's motioned and seconded, and so we're at the amendment phase. I don't know that we need a
Motion to amend.
motion in a second, but because we had a motion on the table and then we deferred
The
it.
script here, which, yes.
Sure.
So yeah, that, we can ignore that last motion because the one on the table from last week does apply. Thank you. Do you have a comment?
I'd be happy to make the amendment that's required.
Okay, you're on.
Motion to amend the second whereas clause by inserting September 3, 2019 and September 10th, 2019 immediately after August 13th, 2019.
Second.
All right, so that is an amendment to last week's motion, which is made by Neitzer, seconded by Counselor Kylie. Can I have a vote on that amendment, please?
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Solberg? Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, so that passes 8-0. So we're on to the amended motion. And is there any other discussion on that? Okay, then I would call for a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg? Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
Okay, that passes 8-0. We'll move on to our next item, please.
Item 22 is a resolution approving the release of 10-foot permanent utility easements located in tracks 1 and 2 of DMI addition to the city of Sioux Falls, Minnehaha County, South Dakota.
Good evening, Kurt.
Good evening. I kind of feel like I won the lottery. I have the first two items instead of the last two items tonight.
You can stay
I
for
was just gonna
you
say
can
that.
stay for the whole meeting.
Right,
though.
you're sorry.
I have a junior football game starting at 7:30, so
All right.
thanks to the clerk's office for allowing this. The easements in question are in the area of right-of-way vacations that were adopted last week. We needed to wait for those to occur before we went and removed the 10-foot utility easements. This is in the DMI addition, I-90 on the north and Cliff Avenue just a little bit to the east of here. DGR Engineering, on behalf of the owner, has requested the release. Easement releases are related, like I said, to the right-of-way vacations adopted last week. Release of the easement will aid in the development of the parcels. City Engineer's Office recommends approval.
All right, thanks, Kurt. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? All right, Council, do you have any questions for Kurt on this topic?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Erickson and seconded by Kylie. Any discussion on this one, Council? Okay, we'll take a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We'll move on to the next item, item 13.
Is the second reading an ordinance approving the cable system franchise renewal agreement between Mid-Continent Communications and the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, along with authorizing the mayor to sign the same.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself on this item.
You are recused, sir.
Excuse me. Excuse me.
Councilor Brecky.
I've just noticed that there's been a change to this. Pat, Councilmember Starr, it is in our, our canons of ethics that it's kind of an exception to Robert's rules that we really have to identify what our conflict is. So when we say we have a conflict of interest and we have to recuse ourselves, we have to identify that conflict for the public. And I just want to get back on track in doing that because we kind of slipped off of that.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, I need to recuse myself because I have been an employee of Vast Broadband.
All right, thank you, Councilor Starr. You are recused
Thank
for
you.
that reason. Thank you, Councilor Brecky. All right, Jason, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Here tonight for the second reading of the cable franchise ordinance. No real new news from last week. Just a reminder to everybody, this is a 10-year agreement. We've added insurance language to help us out, including an umbrella policy. As the council recommended, we made the franchise fee 3%, with 1% going half to the schools and half to CityLink. We did build in an option to review that every 2 years, optionally by the council. If approved, this would go into effect January 1st, 2020. As I mentioned, there's been no correspondence to my office, no phone calls, no emails, and no new information. Mr. Matzel is here from Midco as general counsel. If anybody has any questions for him or I, we'd be happy to answer.
All right, thank you, Jason. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Good evening. Come forward, sir.
Greetings, Brian Burge. So when I was in the city council in Marion, we ran the same thing where you have these long-term agreements. My only inquiry to the council is that this is the time where you guys hold the power and you have 180 residents or 180,000 residents that are all subscribing to internet services, that this is your time where you have 10 years with the bargaining chips that you're speaking for how many people for how many eventual councils. I would inquire, at what point have you leveraged your position that you have looked and said, how can we eke out enough value and make sure that we tune the deal, because it's our one chance to really leverage what we have? And that's my only inquiry of, what if you said, we want this, we are granting you a 10-year exclusive right to this. What are you asking for in return?
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else here to speak on this topic tonight? All right, council, do you have any questions for Jason on this one? Is there a motion on it?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Kylie.
Motion approved by Erickson and seconded by Councilor Kiley. Any discussion, council? All right, Councilor Brecky first.
Yeah, I was just going to kind of respond to that, legitimate public input by by Brian. This has been vigorously negotiated, and we realize what we're giving away, and when we enter into a 10-year agreement, but one of the things that's important in a negotiation like that is, the more we charge, the more is passed through onto the customer. And in earlier discussions and briefings on this issue, there was actually some modifications made to this contract so that additional fees were not going to be passed on. We ratcheted it back so that additional fees were not going to be passed on to the customer. So we did take those things into consideration. This is kind of the finale. There's been some hearings leading up to this where some of these things, more of these details were discussed. But so I will be supporting it, and I'm comfortable that it's been a good negotiation with a good result. Thank you.
Councilor Staley.
And I was going to say the same thing. So if you had been here earlier and heard these discussions, we did listen to the public. We heard what they had to say, and Councilor Neitzer actually was the one who made the motion to reduce the amount that we were going to be paying. So it was good government.
All right, any other discussion, council? All right, there's a motion and a second on the floor. Let's take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Silberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
All right, that passes 7-0. Councilor Sale, I'd ask you to grab Councilor Starr. And while he's doing that, we'll move on to our next item, which is item 14.
Second reading an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, providing supplemental appropriations for the design and construction of a dog park.
Good evening, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. I have a short presentation sort of recapping what we talked about last week, and this is applicable to this item as well as the next two. This project will create a dog park in downtown located at the corner of 10th Street and 2nd Avenue at currently called Fort Sod Park. All project costs are to be donated through an agreement with the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation through a fund from Joe and Jennifer Kirby. There is a naming application attached, which would rename the park Kirby Dog Park at Fort Sod. And some of our preliminary efforts to date have included multiple stakeholder meetings, investigating sculpture relocation opportunities, preliminary concept planning, and cost projections. So looking at the council action tonight, first we have the supplemental appropriation, which will provide funding for the design and construction of the dog park project. 100% of the funds are donated. The gifting agreement, which is next, which will provide the city with $600,000 of funding for redevelopment of the park. The naming application again, Kirby Dog Park at Fort Sod, and I just want to point out that that requires unanimous approval here from the council. And then the following item, which is a CIP amendment, which will add the project to our capital program. Just to recap the gifting agreement itself, it's between the City of Sioux Falls and the Sioux Falls Area Community Foundation. It provides up to $600,000 for renovation of the park. The city will administer all the design, planning, and construction of the project. We'll be responsible for all maintenance going forward with assistance from downtown Sioux Falls. The park will be renamed Kirby Dog Park at Fort Sod. Requires unanimous approval, and the Parks and Recreation Board did recommend approval of the naming application at the August meeting. Some of the next steps, if approved, will be to update the master plan here this fall, design this winter, bid it right away at the start of the year, and construct in the spring with the hopes to open it up later this year, 2020. With that, I can answer any questions along with Andy Patterson from Community Foundation.
Thank you, Mike. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item this evening? Council, do you have questions for Mike on this one? Councilor Starr.
Just my nerdy one of the night. You said that the parks, it just kind of popped in my head, you said the Parks Department approved the naming agreement. Did the city's naming committee then meet as well and approve the naming rights?
The Parks and Recreation Board recommended approval, and in this case, they are the naming committee. Whenever a park is up, an application to rename a park, the Parks and Recreation Board serves as the naming committee.
That's separate from the regular naming committee, like when we take a sponsorship, it
Correct.
just shifts?
Correct, per the
My fault.
ordinance.
I'm
that's-
learning here. I'm trying to make sure I understood that, so.
Thank you. Other questions? Councilor Neitzer.
To clarify, I believe the naming rights, or the naming ordinance says that if it's in a park, the Parks Board approves. If it's somewhere else, then the naming committee, like if it's the Orpheum, the naming committee has to approve.
All right. Other questions for Mike this evening? Take a motion on this item.
Move to approve, Brecky.
Second, Erickson.
All right, motion approved by Councilor Brecky and seconded by Erickson. Any discussion on it, Council? We will call for a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Milberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. Item 15.
Second reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, approving the naming of a space on Fort Sod Park and authorizing the mayor to sign a conditional gift agreement for a cash gift to redevelop space on Fort Sod Park.
Mike, Parks and Rec again. This is the naming application and gifting agreement for the project I just presented on.
Thanks, Mike. Anyone from the public here to speak on this topic tonight? Council, you have any questions for Mike? Councilor Neitzer.
Just as in case people are curious, the reason it requires unanimous approval is if the person that is being named after has not been deceased for 5 years, it requires unanimous approval. And I will gladly make a motion to approve.
Second, Brecky.
All right, motion approved by Neitzer, seconded by Councilor Brecky. Discussion on this, Council? All right, I'll call for a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Milberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
All right, that passes 8-0. We'll move on to our next item.
Item 21 is a resolution amending the 2019-2023 capital program to add a project, Kirby Dog Park at Fort Sod.
Come on, Mike, how many of these we got?
Last one. This is the resolution to amend our capital plan to allow us to design and build the project.
All right, thanks, Mike. Anyone from the public here to speak on this topic tonight? Councilors, do you have any questions on this?
Move to approve, Erickson.
Second, Kylie.
All right, motion approved by Erickson and seconded by Kylie. Any discussion? We will take a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Neitzer?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Starr?
All right, that passes 8-0. Any more dog park stuff, Mike? All right, we'll move on to item 16.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, providing supplemental appropriations for bike trail development, Parks and Recreation, $200,000.
Councilor Neitzer, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This proposal really is in conjunction with a budget amendment that I will be bringing next week. This proposal would supplement the 2019 budget with $200,000 of capital surplus funds. There's about $450,000 remaining to provide for the design and engineering of connection of the bike trail to extend from Legacy Park up to Family Park, connecting at Songbird Street in the middle. This is called the Cherry Creek Corridor, and there's kind of the master plan that the Parks Department has. It shows it eventually going all the way up to University Center. It hits some major landmarks along the way, George McGovern Middle School, the high school, and University Center, some of those other things. This has been in the works for many, many years. In 2007, the bike trail was extended from Dunham Park to Legacy Park, which starts at Marion Road and then goes over to 12th and Sertoma. And in the last few years, we connected the west side connection, which goes directly across the creek over to the Minnehaha County Country Club, which gets us connected to the bike trail. So the west side is fully connected now, and now we're getting to be where we need to start moving it north. Because of right-of-way acquisition issues and simply funding issues, it's been delayed and delayed and deferred and deferred. It's been in the CIP on and off since 2012. In the proposed 2020 budget, it was deleted, and that really kind of comes down to funding. But this is something that the West Side has been talking about, and people were talking to me about before I was even elected, that they wanted to see this done. They want to see connections. Bike trails are really important to people. It comes up at the top of the list when it comes to the park system. They want more connections. We have a wonderful full circle in the middle of the city, and they want to see spurs that go out and get closer to neighborhoods. So this would continue that on. This $200,000, as I said, would provide the engineering money. It could be expended in 2019. They could start surveying. It would carry over into 2020. Capital dollars don't expire at the end of the year, so they could do the engineering throughout 20. And potentially, the budget amendment I will be bringing would do a construction in 21. It works well to do engineering in 1 year and the construction in another year. And Jim, if you could just go forward, I'm just going to just talk about a couple of slides. You can go on to the next one. This shows the right-of-way acquisition. What you see in black are right-of-ways that are acquired. That one yellow piece is one property owner they're working with and having good progress. It still has to be acquired. But otherwise, it's clear sailing from Legacy Park up to Family Park. The connection that is right just before it turns and heads into Family Park, that is Songbird Street, and that would provide direct connection for hundreds, if not thousands, of citizens over in the Hayward area to get them onto the bike trail. And then it would continue on north in the future. You can go to the next slide. So this is just a little depiction. This is my attempt at a little art. L is for legacy, F is for family. That's as good as it gets unless my wife helps me. So this shows essentially kind of the alignment that you would see. It would start where the bike trail ends under the bridge, and then it would kind of straddle along Skunk Creek there and head into Family Park, and it would also go up to Songbird Street. You can continue forward. This is a little bit wider shot. I just wanted to give people a little bit of for those that maybe don't live on the west side, this is what we're talking about. So we're on 12th Street, out west near Sertoma Park, and then heading out in a very fast-growing area. And I'm just going to let you see real quick, this project has been in the plan since 2012, and you can just kind of scroll through it. It's been various iterations, so it's been in for a long time, where it's just kind of been in there and moving back and moving back and moving back. So, in conclusion, the plan would be to provide that $200,000 of engineering and design money. And again, by using the supplemental dollars, the capital surplus that we have this year, we don't have to make any cuts to 2020. It will extend into 2020. They can continue to use it. And then it provides what I believe will be a really responsible incremental approach where we can do the engineering. And I do want to cover one item. It was asked of me, which is a very good question today at the informational, about what if you were to engineer the whole thing and then you only did if you did one piece but you didn't do the other piece. And the answer was there's actually synergy if you engineer the entire thing at one time, because there's one set of permitting, and there's absolutely no harm in engineering it, and if you don't get to the other segment for a while, it's engineered, it's not going to change. You can essentially put it on a shelf for a couple of years, but it's actually better if you engineer the whole thing instead of doing it in two pieces. So there would really be no risk in doing that. In conjunction with this, and I won't really go into it at this point because it's really for next week, will be a discussion about amending the CIP for 2021, the plan to put in construction or the start of construction of this. And it really would depend on how funding and budgets go and what kind of surpluses we have to see what is realistic to get done. But this would start it moving and start to make some progress. So I'm asking for a second reading as a courtesy so that we can consider all of this at one time at the second reading of the budget, and then they coincide together so we can have a discussion of it as a unit. So ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Neitzer. Anyone from the public here to speak on this item? Good evening.
Good evening, Council. I'm Matt Paulson. I'm a resident of Northwest Sioux Falls and an avid user of the bike trail. I just wanted to comment on this issue because I think it makes sense for the long term to extend the bike trail up to STI and George McGovern and the new high school. I know these are officially recreational trails, but a lot of people do use the trails as commuter trails. And if you wanted to bike to the new high school or the new middle school, you'd have to go on 12th and Marion, and those are just very busy streets in the morning commute if you're trying to go downtown. So I think just like we are building a new road on Marion or rebuilding a road to let automotive traffic get to the new high school, it also makes sense to build a new bike trail for people that are biking to school to get to STI and to the new high school and to middle school. I really think it is a safety issue for kids that bike to school, and I'd love to see us make this a priority in kind of our parks budget and bike trail budget in the next several years. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Anyone else here to speak on this item tonight? All right, councilors. Oh, hey, come forward, sir. Yep.
Yes, so a little bit of feedback that I've
Please
noticed.
state your name again, sir.
Brian Burge.
All right.
Seen from the slides earlier, this is a first come, first served market. If you look at the linear cost per foot on the earlier slides, the spot where it's undeveloped, the cost per foot drops. The spot where you wait, your cost goes exponentially. Additionally, we live in a marketplace where to become popular in the national scene, you have to foster a non-traditional transportation method. Setting the precedent for this early on sets that stage. Those are the two thoughts going into it.
Thanks, Brian.
And the last comment from a lean perspective of trying to get the largest change with the least investment forward, the one challenge I would put to the initial budgeting is that in order to make a bike path effective, you first need right-of-way that is defined, and you need access over two obstacles you can't traverse by person, bridges and roads. If you give those two places where you invest your funds first, but you leave just a defined right-of-way open, you allow the public to, without investing in asphalt, engineering, or those excess costs, develop their own path between a defined border. You grow public sentiment where they get excited about the project to justify people's spend to say, yep, we use this trail every day, here's the dollars to make it go into asphalt. So yes, it's early, whoever gets there first gets the best dollar, but the challenge being don't go from zero to full asphalt final product because you have a large dollar spend. To make it lean and make a quick startup, define your right-of-way, define your bridges, leave the rest open, grow your public sentiment, and then execute on asphalt after that point.
Thank you, Brian. Anyone else here to speak on this topic then? All right, councilors, I'll ask for a motion on the floor, and then we can move into some discussion on it.
Mr. Mayor?
Move to approve. Oh, I'm sorry.
Can we do that, Councilor Neitzer? Let's
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Want to make a motion on your own?
Sure, yeah. I'll make a motion to set a date of second reading for Tuesday, September 17th, 2019.
And I'll second that.
All right, motion by Neitzer on that and seconded by Kiley. Now we can move into any discussion. Councilor Kiley.
Jim, if we could move back to the F is for family, L is for legacy slide. Thank you. It was a great way to describe it, if I say so myself. Councilor Neitzer, we're appropriating for bike trail development. So the red line that you've drawn in there, is that your route, or was that already? determined in a previous plan?
Well, it is my rough drawing. They've got the route pretty well laid out. I kind of just gave you a bit of an idea. They do have to cross the creek there,
Right.
which you can see, and that is part of that second segment, which is why it's more expensive, because you got to do a bridge. It's not a great drawing, but I think it's in the ballpark. They have a very, very phased out. They've got it pretty well defined for. And one of them here from Parks could speak to it if you wanted to.
Well, no, my question was, and now that I have the diagram back up, I see we're going to have to, even if we followed the creek, because my question was going to be the cost of 2 bridges versus adding linear feet of bike trail and going around that loop. But I see we're going to have to cross at one point anyway. So
Yeah,
I think it's.
And I wouldn't put a whole lot of. I can maybe get a good overlay maybe that they could help me with that would show exactly the alignment they're thinking of. I wouldn't put a lot of faith in the drawing I made. I'm trying to give you a general, it's going to follow the creek and it's got to get over it to get into Family Park. And then I don't have a drawing there where it would go straight up north to Songbird Street.
No, that's fine. You answered my question. Thank you.
Thanks.
Counselor Sale.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Neitzer, I appreciate your effort, and I think it's a worthy cause. I have one request and one word of caution. First, I would request that all of your maps generally should show north to the top. Being a public school educated person, I think that's just easier for us to understand. And secondly, I would caution any public official to use a Sharpie to alter maps.
Very, very good input. Thank you.
Counselor Brackey.
Just a question for Counselor Neitzer. So what you're asking us to do here is, to, I guess, readjust the priorities in the capital plan to move this up because it's falling to the back, and you'd like the councils to support in, I guess, reprioritizing this, because if we pass this and then ultimately pass the supplemental budget appropriation, it will do the design work, which then will maybe place it in a better position to receive more attention in the hierarchy of the CIP for the years to come. Is that what, really what the purpose is?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Obviously, you have to engineer it and design it first, and that gets the momentum going. And again, the phasing of the exact construction is not, if it has to wait a year because the budget doesn't work out, that is what it is. But yeah, the idea is to try to get the momentum moving to try to start moving this along.
Thank you. And, I'm more than happy to do that. I mean, I think it is appropriate for the council from time to time to make those kinds of adjustments during the budget and CIP processes. That's really what we're here to do, to sometimes speak, as one on things that are important to us. And, apparently this is important to you. I think it's a good one to do this on. But the one thing that I would suggest is, I've been a critic of our committee process because we never use them. And, if we're going to use them, to me, this should have came through the Finance Committee with a 4-person recommend to the full council. Now, I'd rather just get rid of the committee system, but if we're going to have it, to me, that's the way this probably should have came through. But nonetheless, I like it. I'll be supportive of it, and I'm hoping that our concurrence will actually push it forward, in this full CIP process as we move forward. Understanding, of course, Mayor, as I look at you, what you're trying to accomplish with the streets and roads, and I'm certainly, I'm supportive of that. But I think it's kind of fun for us to do something like this once in a while, and I think this is a really worthy project. I think all of us are just dedicated to the bike trail system.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Neitzer.
Yeah, and that's very fair input. One point of context I do want to point out is that the original plan was I wanted to amend the budget to do like a 2021, something like that. And as I worked it through with finance, it just the cleanest way to do it was through this supplemental process, because then we don't have to go cutting things in 2020. It's just tight. So there certainly was no intent to essentially look like it was springing an amendment or some sort of an ordinance at the last minute. We went through a multitude of options, and this is really what we came to. So it's slightly unorthodox, but essentially what we're talking about doing is starting to fund in 20 the engineering and 21 for construction. It's, yeah, in a way it would have been a little bit cleaner had it, been a 2021 amendment rather than this ordinance, but But I generally agree, wherever we can have that discussion. And I think it actually, to your point, and I think you would probably prefer it, in a perfect world, and an informational would have been even better than a committee.
Yes.
Because then everybody could have been there.
I would have.
So, yeah. So.
Counselor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, thank you, Counselor Neitzer. One of the things that I want to point out that's a little bit different, just like your discussion did, is that this is an awesome way to use a capital surplus. This was money that wasn't spent in the 18 budget year because it became surplus from where we budgeted additional projects, and it was money that was left over. It allows us as a council to come back with a priority that's important to us to move forward. But it was because our city employees were frugal in that capital process and having that money that's left over. We spent the large amount of this, the surplus from 18 earlier this year, and now having this extra 400 and I think it's 450, 460, somewhere in between 450 something, but being able to use it in a priority that we all agree upon, and it is definitely, I might want to say that maybe the surveys come back that maybe potholes and streets come first and then parks and bike trails, but we'll argue about potholes another night by the time we're done. So thank you, and thank you for bringing this forward. And like I said, I think it is an appropriate use of the capital surplus.
Councilor Neitzer.
One point of clarification, roads are definitely number one. When I refer to surveys, I'm talking about the parks pieces.
Nope,
Yeah.
I
No, I
recognize
don't think,
the difference, but I had.
I don't think anybody would as much as they love the bike trails, say they want that before the potholes filled. So, thank you.
Amen. Counselor, we have a motion and a second on the floor. Any other discussion on this? All right, let's take a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. Item 17.
First reading, an ordinance of the City of Sioux Falls, South Dakota, providing appropriations, authorizing an increase in property tax revenue pursuant to SDCL 10-13-35, and the means of financing for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020.
Good evening, Sean.
Good evening. So this evening, the ordinance before you is the first step in the budget adoption process. The first reading of this ordinance provides for the appropriations authorization for $307.5 million and for the 9 tax-supported funds and the means of financing the 2020 fiscal year beginning on January 1, including certification of a 2.4% state-certified CPI adjustment for the property taxes for a total anticipated property tax revenue in 2020 of $67,641,905. Just kind of as a quick refresher here, the total budget for the city, which includes appropriated and non-appropriated expenditures for operating and general services, capital investments, and the various enterprise funds, all together is $545.8 million. So that's the anticipated revenues. The general fund portion of that is $178 million approximately, and most of that, 80%, is generated from taxes for this particular general fund, and that's fairly evenly split between sales and property taxes. We talked about this in some of the budget hearings, but as we look into the budgeting and how much of the general fund reserve would be utilized in any given annual year, we do extrapolate out and make estimates based on the knowledge and the information that we have available as to what the general fund would look like for the years to come, and trying to maintain the 25% ratio that is set by policy by the City Council. Maintaining a solid general fund balance is important in order to, one, absorb particular years with higher operating cost adjustments, and the example we often give is the opening of a new fire station, which can add up to 15 FTE in one particular year for one particular department. So absorbing that, the general fund provides some assistance with that. It mitigates against unexpected events such as flooding like we experience this year, and it also serves as a hedge for future economic uncertainty. And as you can see from here, based on the information that we have available, the 25% threshold is maintained through the next 10 years. This year, the proposed use of the reserve fund as part of this budget is $3.3 million. That is down from what was proposed in 2019, so the 2019 budget included a request for $3.7 million. Because this ordinance in particular addresses the property taxes, I wanted to speak to this, and again, we spoke to this briefly as well during the budget hearings. But the inflation component of the property tax is a critical part of the property tax revenues. Postponing or deferring this inflationary increase does have a dramatic impact, and it affects our ability as a city to absorb the inflationary pressures that we experience as well as with the cost increases, cost of living adjustments and so forth, the increases in materials that we experience and we talked about during the budget hearings for things like salt and so forth. The CPI component for the property tax revenue for the 2020 would be $1.5 million, but over a 10-year period, should this be deferred, the actual loss of revenue year after year after year would approximate upwards of $17 million based on our estimates. Similar to the last slide, and what I show you here in the blue bars, that shows where we projected the general fund to be over the next 10 years. Based on the current modeling and anticipated expenditures, we continue to maintain that 25% reserve policy. However, as you look at the green bars, if we were to defer even for 1 year the inflationary adjustment, you can see the impact that that has on our projected general fund reserves. And you can see as early as 2022, we drop below the 25% threshold that is set by this council. If we took the position of actually deferring the inflationary adjustment every year going forward, we would fully deplete our general fund reserve by the year 2027. It's important to point out as well that what the property taxes do and do not fund. Property taxes do not support things like the enterprise utilities, which are supported by user fees. They do not support the entertainment venues because they are supported by the entertainment tax fund, or the third penny. They do not support any of the capital investments or debt repayment. These are supported instead by either the sales and use tax fund, or they are supported by the enterprise utilities. What property taxes do is they support the general fund, they support the general services that are provided by the city government. 40% of this, as you can see, is dedicated to public safety. That's police and fire. 15% supports streets, so that is your pothole repairs, your asphalt, and the clearing of the streets. 11% supports the operations of the parks, which includes things like the zoo. It includes the operations of the community centers, and it also maintains the parks. 5% supports the libraries as well as the museums. The museums is actually about 1% in our partnership with the county. 8% supports healthcare services, but this includes not only the community health clinic, but food safety inspections and mosquito control. And 11% supports is our community investment in planning, in affordable housing, and it's the city's commitment to transit. About 10% supports general government services. So that is the pieces of the government that supports the rest of the operations that we do, the other 90%. And so I bring that up because it gives you some ideas of where the property taxes are being allocated within our budget. A reduction in revenues, and particularly a deferral of the inflationary adjustment of the property taxes, will result in an equal and a direct reduction in these service areas, as it must be and for us to balance our budget. Services would have to be cut, not just one time, but they would have to be structural, because it would be a loss of revenues, not just in 2020, but in the years to come as well. In terms of total expenditures, on the expenditure side, the total budget is $545.4 million, and again, that is inclusive of everything. That is our capital investments, our enterprise funds, and our general fund. The general fund portion, or the portion that does fund our general operations for the city, is again $178 million. The last thing I wanted to talk to a little bit is in terms of the growth of the budget. So the City of Sioux Falls budget is broad and it is complex, and it's based on another number of departments, funds, and enterprises that comprise it. However, in basic terms, it can be narrowed down to two things: the capital portion and the non-capital portion, with that non-capital portion essentially being operations. Year-to-year changes in the budget can be disproportionately impacted based on the number of investments on the capital side that we are making. So in order to understand the increase in the budget, one must take a look at both the capital side and the operating side. The overall budget increase, as proposed in the 2020 budget, which you would be reviewing and adopting by resolution next week, the increase is $47 million, or a 9.4% increase. But it's important to point out that 7.1% of this 9.4%, or 75% of the total increase proposed in the budget, is related to capital items. These are our construction investments in the community for infrastructure and bricks and mortar projects. 25% of the increase, or about $11.7 million, or equal to about 2.3% increase overall, is related to what we would consider general operations of the government. This includes all of the wages and benefits adjustments, the 3% COLAs that are allocated as part of the labor agreements, and it also includes a $1.8 million investment in repairs and materials as we continue to make investments in preserving and maintaining the integrity of our assets. So before you would be the first reading with a request to set a second reading for next week. Followed by this on the agenda will be the public hearing that is required as part of the budgeting process. And then next week, with approval of this first reading, would go to second reading as well as the approval of the budget resolution and the adoption of the capital program. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sean. Appreciate it. Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item tonight? Good evening.
Good evening. Let me pull this up here. Hello, my name is Zach DeBoer. As the council begins to weigh in on the proposed CIP budget, I wanted to bring forward an idea for your consideration that I believe could have tremendous impact on Sioux Falls for years to come. My idea is to adopt a 10-foot wide traffic lane standard for all new and existing streets in Sioux Falls. I know that doesn't sound very exciting or impactful, but because time is short, I want to focus on just two of the reasons why this is an ideal worth supporting. The first reason to support this is 10-foot lanes are cheaper to build. Less road means less asphalt to pour, fewer feet of utilities to lay. 10-foot lanes are cheaper to maintain. Narrower lanes mean fewer square feet of mill overlay, utility updates, street sweeping, and snow removal. 10-foot lanes will help with flooding and drainage issues. By returning excess pavement to green space, we can collect more rainwater and alleviate pressure on our storm sewer system, which I'm sure we're all on board for. 10-foot lanes will increase property values for homes and building owners who, due to the increased levels of walkability and safety, which leads me to my second major reason to support this is safety. 10-foot lanes reduce illegal speeding, which is the #1 complaint from police officers here from neighborhoods. 10-foot lanes keep pedestrians alive and safe. Narrower lanes keep cars moving at safe speeds, therefore making the pedestrians safer. They also keep the drivers safer. There are fewer traffic accidents and fewer fatalities with 10-foot lanes. 10-foot lanes can also reduce the crime rate, making streets and sidewalks safer and more enjoyable. To walk along means more eyes on the streets and helps build stronger communities. No, those are just some of the ways 10-foot lanes could make Sioux Falls an even greater place to live, without even mentioning the positive effects it would have on public transportation, the environment, public health, and even workforce development. I would also like to point out that this isn't a crazy or unique idea. Sioux Falls already has miles of traffic lanes that are 10 feet wide, and many other cities have already made that switch or have already had 10-foot lanes forever. Most of the streets in Sioux Falls are 11 feet wide, so we're talking about 1 foot of difference. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it adds up. For example, if we repaved 33rd Street between Cliff and Minnesota Avenue with 10 feet instead of 11, that's 10,000 square feet of asphalt that we don't have to pave in today and in the future. That's just 1 mile. I've talked about this topic before and issues about walkability, but tonight you're talking about $620 million worth of street and road projects. Most of those projects have been designed with 11 to 12 foot wide lanes. Can you imagine the amount of square feet in asphalt and utility line we could save by making this small switch on all of these projects? The cost savings today and tomorrow would be staggering. I'm asking the council and the mayor to give this idea some serious consideration. By making the small change to 10-foot wide traffic lanes, we could create safer neighborhoods, save the city millions of dollars, and create a more financially resilient Sioux Falls. Thank you.
Thank you, Zach. Anyone else from the public here to speak on this item tonight? Come forward, please. Good evening.
Good evening. Julian Baudouin here in Sioux Falls. While I agree with that, I am a law enforcement officer here in the state of South Dakota, and speeds are definitely our #1 concern and the #1 cause for traffic accidents. However, the #2 cause is hazardous movement violations. And so while I agree that we definitely need to explore some different options, I would maybe request that we get some accident reconstructionists in the room to have that conversation and make a better decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this topic tonight? Again, related to the property tax increase.
Brian Burge. So a little bit of encouragement I've seen used in when you're reviewing budgets. A public will generally support you when they see that you are healthy and you are willing to pull the financial levers to make things happen. Don't be afraid when you look at these numbers to look at it as a change your denominator, change your unit measure from millions to people or citizen days. If you calculate that out, that's approximately $8.30 per citizen day. The citizens will support you in making changes to that and growing that by 10% so that you're healthy, so that you have financial levers that you can pull. But when you pull those levers, evaluate them in that same metric of citizen days so that you're ready to execute quickly on poignant efforts so that you make those things come true. But don't be afraid of running the numbers so that you're healthy and you have dollars available to make things happen, but execute when you need to do it. Don't bicker over $20,000. When you divide it out by how many citizen days there are, you're bickering over pennies. So make sure you're confident in your decisions to move forward, and the public will support you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to speak on this item tonight? All right, councilors, any questions for Sean on this? Look for a motion to set a date, a second reading for Tuesday, September 17 on this.
Move to approve.
All right, motion approved by Kylie. Councilor Selberg, you second that? Second. All right, seconded by Selberg. Discussion, council, on this? Councilor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Actually, could you flip it back to page 4 of your presentation that had the charts? Not a question, but more just to look at the number. Whoop. Yeah, perfect. It intrigued me that we would just automatically assume with the green or the teal line dropping out that we wouldn't replace the property tax cut. We just make the assumption because the state allows us to make a property tax increase every year that we would do it. This $1.5 million that we would be looking for in our 2020 budget isn't necessary. Our reserves are, I wouldn't say they're at record levels, but they're there. We've already taken and made a decision, at least in the proposed budget by the mayor and the administration, to take a fire station that we would normally pay for with capital dollars and move it to long-term debt, where we would just normally pay for it ourselves out of the cost of a fire station that we continually kick down the road. And even with the projections of taking out the increase for the 2020 budget year for the property tax increase, the $1.5 million, by 2029, we're still well above the 25% target, assuming that we don't make any cuts. We just all of a sudden decide that if we're not going to raise taxes, we wouldn't offset that with cuts. I'm saying that tonight, I'm not going to support moving forward with a property tax increase when we don't need it. There are other units of government in our community that are making large increases in property taxes. They're opting out. And at the same time, when we talk about affordable or accessible housing in our community, we're saying that we need the $17 million over the next 10 years more than our residents need it. It sounds like a small increase tonight that we're making for $1.5 million, but when we look at it over the 10 years, it's $17 million. We're making housing more expensive for the people that can least afford it in our community. On a typical house, I know this equates to $2.50. It's not a huge thing, and it's a small part of what we're doing, but we're incrementally protecting our budget and government. At the same time, when you flip this chart over, you're making a tax burden for our citizens to be a considerable amount of money. And again, to assume that we wouldn't make any cuts if we cut this out, we have that ability next week. We don't have to move forward with a property tax increase, and by doing that, we can make the cuts. We can take part of it from reserves. We can find the additional savings in the budget, which is what we're willing to do if we don't move forward with this. We are also adjusting for inflation by the value of properties increasing in our community. Not only new construction that's coming on board, but by the housing values going up. So to say that we're not taking a cost of living increase is not correct. we're getting a considerable increase in the amount of property taxes just by the value of homes going up in the community. And again, it's those starter homes that are continually going up in value and are paying more in property taxes. And then we add another property tax increase on top of that. And I know it doesn't, again, sound like a lot of money until you're the one paying the bill. This unit of government has enough money to continue on and fund ourselves without raising our community's property taxes, no matter what amount it is, whether it's a large amount or a small amount. We have the ability tonight to do the right thing. This chart on page 4 from tonight's presentation shows that. And that we have to be responsible, and there are some things. And in our budget, we're well past needs. We are into wants in a lot of categories in our budget. And our community expects a lot of wants, and they have a lot of wants. But we've got to take care of the needs first. We're adding, when we look at our budget, we're adding 37 new FTEs over the last 2 years in these 2 budget agreements. We have the ability to forego $1.5 million in property taxes. And everyone says, oh, this is money we'll never get back. It's also money that our taxpayers will never have to pay. The other thing is our state legislature has given us the ability to do the right thing. If there is some kind of catastrophe in the future, which there is always that possibility, we have the ability to opt out and come back and get those dollars if we need them and our community demands those services that we're not able to pay in the future. That opt-out proposal opportunity is there for other units of government. We've seen our schools use it. We've seen our county have to use it. We don't need to use it when we're at over 30% in reserves. So I'm not going to support moving this forward to second reading, and I'm certainly not going to support it at second reading.
Councilor Neitzer.
Well, I guess, first of all, I would say that the largest portion of our general fund is wages and salaries, by far. We approved COLAs at 3%, I believe it is. We have to pay that. So you got to take that off the table. Unless you can identify some employees that you'd like to terminate, I guess you could do that if you can identify which ones aren't going to impact city services. So if you take wages off the table in the general fund, then that leaves you with city services. And we're not talking about $1.5 million of just one time. We're talking structural. So you're gonna have to find something, it's less dental health clinics or less snow plowing or something. It's year after year after year after year. So I guess I would just challenge those that, and I'm fiscally conservative. I don't like doing any sort of increases. But you have inflationary pressures. We have approved wage increases. We have to pay them. Salt continues to go up. Gas goes up for our police cars. All of these inflationary pressures happen, and we have to keep up with inflation. We have to deal with that. So I guess I would challenge those that may be against this. I want you to bring $1.5 million or so of structural cuts that you would make. Identify it. What will you cut from the general fund to make up for this? And it can't be a one-time gimmick. It's got to be a structural every year. And if you could find in $1.5 million, then I guess we can have that talk. When I think about this, these things come up so often. The CPI increase, it's kind of like when we have when we see these things, when we have these rate discussions and the data is in front of us. It would be easy for me to just say, well, I'm not going to approve it because I'm not going to approve a tax increase. But I know good and well what it's going to do is it's going to leave a mess for somebody down the road. I'm going to kick the can down the road, and a future council is either going to have to make some draconian increase to recapture with some opt-out, or they're going to have to make major cuts. We just need to make sure that we're funding city services. People want these core city services, and if people can find $1.5 million of frivolous spending in the general fund, I challenge that, and I guess I'd like to see that. So, the idea that we just have all this stuff in the general fund that we can just go chopping, again, we approve these COLA increases. In fact, we want to hire more officers, and we've wanted to You know, we maybe wanted to do even more for the officers. So we can't have it both ways. You know, we've committed to paying these salaries and to providing these services, and there's more and more demand for city services. So I'm just going to urge that we make sure we do the right thing and the tough thing, and approve a modest increase, which, by the way, isn't even quite enough to keep up with the COLA increase that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other discussion on this one, Council? All right, there's a motion and a second to set a date of reading for Tuesday, September 17th on the floor. So let's take a vote on that, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
No. All right, that passes 7-1. We'll move on to item 18.
Public hearing for proposed resolution adopting the budget for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2020, and the 2020-2024 capital program.
Are you going to talk on this one, Sean? All right, so there's nothing to introduce on it, really? All right, well, it's exactly what Denise just said. It's a public hearing for our budget. So because it's not up for final consideration, we're just taking public input. So if anyone has input at this time, you can have 3 minutes to talk about our budget on this proposed resolution.
Zach DeBoer. Pretend what I did earlier is happening now. That's all.
Right. I wasn't going to cut you off, but I'm like, it probably fits better here. But the point was, point was taken either way, man. Anyone else want to speak to this item tonight? All right, clerk, we'll move on to our next item, please.
Item 19, a resolution approving the special assessment role for the Main Street Business Improvement District in the city of Sioux Falls, South Dakota.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Dustin.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Dustin Powers with the Planning and Development Services Department. Item 19 is asking for council approval of a special assessment levy for the Main Street Business Improvement District. On the screen, you'll see the map. It's a little hard to see, but there is a yellow outline there that depicts our downtown area, which is the area that's made up of the Business Improvement District. Within the district, there are 241 properties this year that'll be levied as part of the resolution tonight. Funds generated by the Business Improvement District are administered through Downtown Sioux Falls Incorporated, and these funds are expended for the betterment of downtown through programming, services, and activities that Downtown Sioux Falls provides. Joe Batchelor with Downtown Sioux Falls is here tonight behind me if there's any questions related to their efforts associated with the Business Improvement Districts and the services that they provide. Just a couple of quick items that I'll point out. The resolution tonight that you're voting on is a cumulative assessment of $178,062.81 across those 241 properties. The maximum assessment any one property pays is $1,700. The Main Street Business Improvement District has been in place since 1989, so this is the 30th year of us supporting, the city supporting this district. Notice of hearings were published in the Argus Leader on August 2nd and August 9th, notifying of this hearing here today. And then also letters were sent to each of the property owners on August 8th, sending them the notice of the hearing and their estimated assessment for this year. This item was brought forward to the Main Street Business Improvement District Board, which is the advisory board related to the district. And on August 21st, they unanimously approved this assessment. So with that, myself or Joe, if you have any questions for us, will be here.
Thank you, Dustin. Anyone from the public care to speak on this topic tonight? All right, councilors, do you have any questions for Dustin or for Mr. Batchelor this evening? All right, I look for a motion to approve this item.
Move approval, Nitzert.
Second, Sale.
All right, motion approved by Nitzert, seconded by Councilor Sale. Is there any discussion, council? Clerk will take a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky? Yes. Erickson?
Yes.
Kylie?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Sailberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes.
All right, that passes 8-0. We'll move on to item 20.
A resolution approving the 2019-2020 budget for the Sioux Falls Convention and Visitors Bureau Business Improvement District.
Good evening, Terry. You're on. Hold those way down. There you go.
Way down. Terry Schmidt, Executive Director of the Sioux Falls Convention and Visitors Bureau. I guess I would be happy to answer any questions. I did review the budget with the council this afternoon. We had good discussion. The bid budget has been approved by the bid board, by the Chamber's Budget and Finance Committee, by the Chamber Board, and I would ask for your approval this evening as well.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak on this item tonight? Siri does. All right. Councilors, do you have any questions for Terry on this? Councilor Selberg.
Terry, I was not here this afternoon. I'm sorry, but I just want to tell you again that how much I appreciate what you do. You were probably the biggest cheerleader for Sioux Falls there is out there, and you've done a really good job for a really long time, and thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right?
All right. Questions for Terry? Councilor Kiley.
Terry, I believe this afternoon you had stated that you could, that you were told that you could rely on a budget of just over 2.1, or it was somewhere over 2 million.
Yes.
But you've elected to go under that with basically 1.9, and I just wish to express my gratitude for that conservative approach.
Well, hopefully I'm wrong, and we'll be able to come back with a supplemental budget.
Well, I hope you're wrong too, and it is always nice to have that extra.
Yes, thank you.
But it's a little tough to make up for it if you don't have it.
All right.
Thanks.
Councilors, do you have any other questions for Terry while we have her? All right, I would look for a motion on this item.
Move to approve, Brecky.
Second, Kylie.
All right, a motion to approve by Councilor Brecky and seconded by Kiley. Any discussion, council? All right, we will take a vote, please.
Councilmember Staley?
Yes.
Brecky?
Yes.
Erickson?
Yes.
Kiley?
Yes.
Nitzert?
Yes.
Selberg?
Yes.
Sale?
Yes.
Star?
Yes. All right, that passes 8-0. Councilors, do you have any new business tonight?
Move to adjourn, Star.
Second.
All right, motion adjourned by Starr and seconded by Selberg. All those in favor say yes.
Yes.
All those
Yes.
opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Have a good night.